Hey, Pacific Northwest Conference family. Hey, we just came off of Easter. Happy Easter. He is arisen.
Yes,
He is
risen
risen indeed,
indeed.
Joe. Absolutely. We are coming off of all of our experiences from Holy Week and the celebration of Easter, of the empty tomb, and Christ manifesting himself to his disciples, continuing to teach about the kingdom, continuing to lead them into belief and from belief into mission. And I just love this time of year and pray that you all have had a wonderful Holy Week and that as you look at the rest of the spring here, that you're going forward with great excitement.
Wonderful. That's
Yeah, yeah.
wonderful. Well, we had talked about some information. You sent me an article that was posted in the Seattle Times, and coming off of these Easter celebrations is a good time, I think, for us to kind of focus in a little bit on what this article pointed out. And it was posted on February 29th. We'll put the link in so you can go ahead and read it for yourselves. But it opens up with this, and it says that Americans have grown less religious over the past decade and that religious services are down across the country. And so, coming off Easter, when of course that's kind of that's when the Creasters come out, people who don't go to church normally, that go to Christmas and Easter, we see that influx of people. But this article is pointing out the fact that many don't participate. And in the Seattle area specifically, the author says that the majority of adults in Seattle, 64%, never attend or even go once a year, which it pencils out to 1.8 million in the Seattle metro area do not go to any kind of religious services throughout the year. And that's in a population of 3.1 million in that metro area. How does that strike you, Greg?
I'm sure folks in the Seattle area saw that article because it was pretty front and center for us, placing us and in the number one spot in the country out of the largest 15 metro areas that this article was quoting. We think of the Northeast as a very unchurched area historically over the decades. They usually have the first spot, but here we are, Seattle Metro, having the first spot, in San Francisco, number two. This is how it strikes me, Joe. Great opportunity. Great opportunity. On one hand, we can spin this. We could put the accent on, oh my goodness, what are we doing wrong? What is wrong? And certainly there are questions that we need to ask about that. Certainly post-pandemic, we've been asking a lot of questions, right? How do we exegete? How do we break down? How do we discern how to look at our cultural moment, historical cultural moment? How do we engage this mission field right now? This mission field that is saying 64% of the people won't even darken the door of a church ever, in the greater Seattle area. And this is probably not much different than what Portland is experiencing for sure. Now, Idaho and Helena may be a little different, but we're all feeling that same pressure. This article just underscores a lot of what we've been experiencing kind
Well,
of
and
post-pandemic and
our
into this
standard of
current.
measures of how we assess how well we're doing or how we
Mhm.
evaluate what is working and what isn't working because our online universe has expounded has become more complicated, hasn't it?
It has for sure. But, on one hand, we have to figure out ways to adapt ourselves to this online reality. But no longer, very seldomly, are folks coming in because they're driving by but they're checking everything online first. We do this all the time, right, Joe? Do you go to Costco? Do you go to the store and you're looking at a product and what's the first thing you do? You pull out your phone and you're doing the research, right? Is
Yeah.
this the best price? Does this have the most stars?
Well,
I want
COVID
I want some
certainly blew
samples.
the doors off the church, and people know what's going on inside, and so it really makes us be more aware of how we present and how we communicate and whether or not we're doing that well.
Yeah,
Let's talk about
absolutely.
kind of their evaluation of the ethnic community being involved. And I want to point out that they in this article only broke down the Black community. They did not break down any other community, but they did say that 35% of Black people nationally do not attend the church, as opposed to white 54%. But they said, Seattle is ethnically 6% Black. And so, when you factor all that in, we are not seeing that segment of our communities represented well either. How do you think ethnicity plays into this conversation of those who attend or engage in religious activities?
Yeah, I think what you're saying about it still being universal is true. I think despite ethnicities, we're seeing church attendance, church commitments down across the board. But certainly this gets into when you look at population, anticipated population change, and as you think about immigration patterns and all of these things, we have to really take a step back and say, okay, um, where is the spirit flowing? Where are the opportunities that we're seeing? Where's their life? Where is their fruitfulness? And I was just with Newport this past week with their LMDJ team and noting how much change has happened since 2010 in Bellevue. That is primarily coming from Asian Americans and secondarily, but significantly still from Latinos, and breaking down what that looks like, and then the fact that we all together helped plant Seattle Chinese Covenant Church, who's right there in the middle of Bellevue. And this is one of our most active mission fields, fruitful mission fields that we're doing together as 71 churches. They probably have more baptisms there than any of our churches combined.
Yes.
There's just an amazing outpouring of the Spirit, right? So, though these churches are not large, there's pretty significant ministry that is going on. And then just churches trying to figure out how to reach out to their ever and ever diversifying, growing diversity, in their neighborhoods. How do they address that? But I really think that one of the solutions, when it comes down to it, is nothing different than we've always known. It's just relationships. And I know it might sound trite or it might sound overly simplistic, but despite the digital world that we're in today, it will still always come down to people are longing to be life on life because that is the hardwiring of how God created us to be. We are created in the image of God, and in the image of God is community and Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so that is hardwired into our very being. So despite a pandemic, despite our ever increasing digital world, yes, that potentially is the most significant front door for us. But ultimately, where evangelism and discipleship and change happens is going to be life on life.
Well, and that leads me into my last question about this article, or my last observation. Older people are more connected to the church versus younger people being connected to the church. How are we? I mean, our young people are just, like you said, craving relationship. They're craving that life on life. How are we as a covenant community doing in that regard, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's always a challenge, right? For every generation, this younger generation has been the most challenging. Identity formation is happening in these decades, and starting families, starting careers, busyness certainly happens, and we seem to be busier than ever in these days. Part of it is making sure that we are making great investments in our youth and children. And here in the conference, we have poured financial resources and staffing and attention into making sure that we are resourcing you all there in the 71 churches to make sure we're getting our kids to the retreats there at the camp with Mud and Thunder, to Unite that's coming up this summer, but also making sure your youth and children's workers are well resourced and connected themselves. And now with the Emerge retreat, that's we're trying to build upon over these years. That will also be a great connection point for our young adults. But I think that having a multi-generational vision, staying on the philosophy of ministry of family ministries, has been great movement that a lot of our churches have really latched onto, and trusting that that will bear fruit over the
Yeah.
generation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's put a little
Mhm.
lid on that conversation. And like I said,
Yeah.
link to that article. I wanted to give you a moment to highlight our upcoming annual meeting.
We are in Portland this year, Jill, and the Ministerial Association is going to be starting their meetings on Thursday, on April 18th, at First Covenant, which is our oldest church. So the Ministerial Association will get to meet at our oldest church. And then we'll move over for workshops and worship. And then on Saturday, the annual meeting at Milwaukee Covenant Church. Get this, Jill. Milwaukee Covenant Church was birthed out by 7 families from First Covenant that lived in that area. And so it got to the point where they're like, what would it look like to start a ministry in Milwaukee? And so they met in a home there in Milwaukee, as Milwaukee was probably not much back then, and started to pray and to worship together. And the first committee that they created was called the Committee on Outreach in Milwaukee. I love that. I
So
love that. I love it. I love that we're getting back to our roots, going back to first, and then we're going to be at Milwaukee. And really the spirit of what birthed Milwaukee, we pray all of that for our whole region, but particularly for the greater Portland area and for Oregon. I don't know if people realize that of our 71 churches, that we only have 16 in Oregon. We have 52 in Washington, two in Montana, one in Idaho, and we just continue to long for just for more opportunities for God to have us serve in different places in Oregon. So invite you all to join us. That'll be April 18th, 19th, and 20th. If you haven't registered yet, please do make sure you get your delegates in there, and there will be an online option. Hope to see you
awesome.
there.